Let's go. The 9-game conference schedule is here, and it is indeed a thing of beauty. Okay. If you're scared, keep your ass at home, baby. It's going to be a difficult one, but guess what? We are open to the challenge. And we start off here with week 1 versus Clemson. That will indeed be a night game. We don't have times for most of these games, but we do know LSU versus Clemson in week 1 will be a 7 p.m. kickoff. So, what are the big takeaways? If you're listening via audio, we'll go through the schedule really quickly. It's Clemson, Louisiana Tech. You get Ole Miss on the road. And then after that, it's 2 back-to-back home games, Texas A&M and McNeese. McNeese being the last non-P4 that you play for the rest of the season. And then you have Kentucky at Kentucky, Mississippi State at home, Auburn on the road, and then you have a bye week, back-to-back home games versus Alabama and Texas, and then you're on the road versus Tennessee and Arkansas. Type Y for yes, type N for no. You think LSU got one of the better scheduled draws in the entire SEC? And to me, the answer to that is probably no, considering that the month of November will be the toughest month of November I can remember at LSU, where you're finishing the year playing 2 top 15 national recruiters in Alabama and Texas. You have another top 15 national recruiter in Tennessee, and then you end the season at Arkansas in one of the rare instances on this schedule in back-to-back road games. And that's what really concerns me about this schedule, is that LSU actually does start the season with one of the easier schedules in the SEC, but it does get harder. And if you were to break this down, LSU's month of November is probably the single most difficult month of November that you see on the schedule right here. We're going to move this little brand element for you to be able to see those top right schools. And as you can see, a school like Alabama, they strategically put Chattanooga there in week 12. You have a school like Auburn, they have a week 12 game versus Samford. So you could see that there's going to be, to me, with this schedule, some huge advantages for these teams that have a week game that they get to play in that final week before rivalry week. So, what are the interesting quirks about the schedule from an LSU perspective? Well, the first SEC game that Lane Kiffin will coach will be a game at Ole Miss in week 3. So don't think that the schedule masterminds didn't do that on purpose. Ole Miss, of course, is also part of the 3 permanent team rotation for LSU. So that, to me, is the biggest takeaway from this schedule, is that, well, you will play Ole Miss. That is, to me, the game that mostly everyone throughout college football is going to have circled in week 3, especially considering you look at week 3 in the SEC. There are so many wins on there. Oklahoma gets New Mexico. Tennessee gets the powerful Kennesaw State. Texas gets UTSA, the Roadrunners. So that week 3 game is going to be the biggest game in college football for maybe the season in terms of vitriol between two teams. The second big takeaway from an LSU perspective is you do have a new rivalry week opponent. All right. That, of course, will be Arkansas, which is how it should be, right? I grew up, the LSU Arkansas rivalry was a real thing in the month of November. You guys know I played high school football in Arkansas. My wife's an Arkansas Razorback. This is a pure rivalry. It's not as important as some of the other rivalries, but it is the Battle of the Golden Boot. Both teams are the only P4 teams in their state. And on top of that, there is some history. This historically has been a relatively close game over the years. So I am looking forward to LSU versus Arkansas being the new rivalry week game. But the single biggest takeaway that you must have after watching this schedule release is that the month of November, and it's so big, the month of November for LSU is the most difficult month of November I can remember in a very long time. Now, it's not too out of the ordinary for a month of November to not be strong, right? Normally that's when, you're playing some of the more difficult teams on your schedule, right? You're normally playing a rivalry week game in that final month or that final week. And then, of course, you play Alabama. And this is a more minor takeaway, even with the 9 game conference schedule. LSU and Alabama will have a bye week before they play each other. So, this graphic via the kind folks at LSUsports.net, as you can clearly see, they did not show where the bye week was for LSU. And as you can see, you can come to your own conclusion here. October 24th versus Auburn. That game is on the road. Then you'll get that bye week, and then you'll go to Alabama. And then you have, to me, or Alabama will come to Baton Rouge. This is such a difficult stretch because, yes, you get Alabama and Texas in back-to-back weeks at home, but at the same time, you have to go back-to-back on the road the next 2 weeks. And Alabama and Texas both should have very, very, very strong teams next year, okay? Kyle Jarrett says College game day will be in Oxford in week 3, no doubt. Okay. Sam says 8-4 next year. Louisiana Spy says this is the easiest 12-0 schedule they have had in years. If any SEC team in the first year of a 9-game conference schedule goes 12-0, just hand them the national championship trophy, for goodness sakes. Now, I went through, to me, the biggest takeaways. Now, let's get to the biggest positive on the schedule. This is one of the easier starts for an LSU schedule that I can also remember. Clemson is going to be in the middle of a pretty big rebuild, right? They're going to have a new quarterback next year. They're going to need to bring in some new receivers. They're going to need to bring in a brand new defensive line, basically. They're losing a lot of defensive talent. Then, of course, you have your 2 non-P4s that will be coming to the state of Louisiana. Yes, Ole Miss on the road, that's going to be difficult because of how pumped up Ole Miss is going to be for that game. But I think most rational folk will understand that Ole Miss is going to take some kind of step back in year 1 without Lane Kiffin. And then you have Texas A&M and McNeese in back-to-back weeks. Once again, A&M is probably going to be very good. I would think that they're going to be no less than a top 5 team going into college football next season with Marcel Reed coming back. So that's a difficult game. There's no other way around it. But you also get McNeese and you also get Kentucky. So you go through the schedule. In the first half of the season, LSU has a real opportunity here to be 5-1 to start the season. And that, to me, is about where you would want to be with Lane Kiffin in year 1. One area you can't be if you want to get to the college football playoff is 4-2. If you go 4-2 in these first 6 weeks, the likelihood that you're going to finish 9-3, which probably is good enough to get into the college football playoff next year with a 9-game conference schedule, I don't know. I really, really, really don't know. So for me, I like that you start soft. I like that you start easy. I am of the belief that college football teams are better off with their easier games early in the year, right? You get some momentum, you get some cohesiveness. In the transfer portal era, you're not going to lose a locker room where players are thinking about their next move. You're able to establish a momentum and so on and so on and so on. And you also start off with a good ranking. So I do like that the fact of the matter here is that the schedule is easier for LSU to start the season. And then you get to the second half. Mississippi State, we'll see what they do with Kamario Taylor. That's the big domino there. And then the following week, you do get Auburn. Both of those coaches run very similar schemes. Mississippi State, of course, from the Lane Kiffin tree. Obviously, a Briles coach and Jeff Levy. Auburn, another Briles coach there with, and by Briles coach, I mean they run the Art Briles variation of the spread. And Alex Golish is definitely a guy that's going to do a lot of what Tennessee is going to do in the next month, right? So Mississippi State and Auburn, you're going to, be in a track meet versus both of those teams that love to play fast. And then you get to November where it is truly, truly difficult. Alabama, Texas, Tennessee, and Arkansas. Arkansas is probably going to be the lowest rated P4 team on your schedule, along with Kentucky. Alabama, Texas, Tennessee, it's going to be difficult. Now, of course, you have quite a few dominoes here with this initial schedule release, the biggest of which you simply don't know who your quarterback is going to be. And that is the single most important thing for LSU next year. Who is LSU's quarterback going to be going into 2026? We don't know that. We don't know that just yet. And then the second thing, with a 9-game conference schedule and no rest, what I would do if I were Lane Kiffin, I'm going to my entire strength and conditioning and nutrition staff saying, hey, you guys have got to let me know what your meters and your science is telling you as far as injury prevention. I do think one positive EV or plus EV move that a coach can do in a 9-game conference schedule is be on the cautious side of load managing this thing. Remember, it's not only a 9-game conference schedule, is a 9-game conference schedule with only one bye week. So what I would do if I were the powers that be in the Southeastern Conference, I am doing whatever it takes to get 2 byes on the schedule. And I don't know exactly how you do that, but you've got to have a double bye schedule with the 9-game conference schedule. I truly do believe that, and I'm the biggest proponent of a 9-game conference schedule than anyone who does this. Here is my stance. If you're scared, leave your ass at home. This is what it's all about. This is what college football should be. More teams playing one another in your own conference. Remember, the 9-game SEC schedule has as much to do with the next year's schedule as a current year schedule in terms of schedule diversity, right? Just adding that one extra game is going to make every team in the conference play every other team in the conference at least once out of every 2 years. Remember, the old schedule, the 8-gamer, and a 14-team SEC, you were only playing every other team in your conference that wasn't a part of your 7 locked-in opponents. You were playing them once every 6 years. Now, in a 9-game conference schedule, in a bigger conference, you're going to play every team once every 2 years. That is so much better. And that excites me as a college football fanatic. Now, every last thing that people point to about why they do not like the 9-game conference schedule comes down to something that I hate, which is the playoff, right? If every last argument that you have in anything regarding the college football landscape has to do with the playoff, you're looking at the sport all too wrong. You're looking at it wrong. The college football playoff discussion gets so old. When you're in the middle of this 9-game conference schedule, even if we're not doing well, you're going to look at me and say, Carter, this is awesome. This is awesome. 9-game conference schedule. It's a thing of beauty. Are there going to be some teams that are going to hate it? Yeah. Arkansas is going to hate it. South Carolina is going to hate it. Another thing about the 9-game conference schedule that teams need to be ready for, and this would be something that I would bring up to Lane that I feel is important in this entire conversation, is do we need to play slower? You notice so many of these teams their entire offensive identity is going fast. Going very fast. Auburn, Alex Golish, they're going to go fast. South Carolina, they hired Kendall Briles. They're going to go fast. Alex Golish, they're going to go fast. Tennessee's going to go fast. So Ole Miss's offense, which is faster than any of these, is it a plus EV move to slow it down some going into next year? I don't know. It's something you do have to take into consideration. But if you're Lane, you also say, hey, I am of the belief that whatever I want to do offensively to put up the most points, put up the highest yard per play, put up the big explosive plays that we are accustomed to at the Lane Kiffin School of Quarterbacks. I didn't say that smoothly at all. That's what we're going to do. Okay. So I want to get to a few of your comments as far as why you hate the 9-game conference schedule. The Franco Nation, who always pushes back against me, that's always welcome. This sucks how you're happy about this. No, you're looking at it wrong. We won't you like it, you effing stupid dude. We have one bye. And guess what? The Big Ten is laughing at Greg because he fell for a trap. Once again, if your whole argument regarding this schedule has everything to do with what everyone else is doing, you're not enjoying the sport. I don't give a shit about the Big Ten and what they do. The ACC is a mess. Why am I worrying about comparing what the SEC is doing, which has a good, even schedule where we're going to get better games and more teams playing one another in an actual conference, which is how a conference is supposed to be? Why am I worried about what they're doing? If your whole argument in this entire sport has everything to do with the college football playoff and how the SEC compares to the Pac-2 or the AAC or the BET or the ESPN or the OAN or the CNN or the OBGYN, I don't give a damn. I really don't give a damn what the other conferences do. All right? What I care about is my conference. And I cover this conference, and it's going to make the product better. Are there going to be some more injuries? Sure. Are there going to be more heartbroken fan bases? Sure. Is there going to be a lack of fan support at these smaller schools that don't quite stand as big of a chance? Absolutely. But you signed up for it. If you don't want to be here, guess what? We can bring on the relegation system. There are plenty of teams that would love the relegation system. You're telling me that I could join the SEC and get a better check? You better believe it. But we're never going to bring relegation into the fold here. Or will we? I don't know. Okay, if you're scared, maybe this channel's not for you. If you're worried about the Big Ten, guess what? There's plenty of Big Ten channels. If you want to watch ACC content, go see Danny Cannell. I don't know what to tell you. But if you don't think this is beautiful, then, well, YouTube's endless. Go watch cooking channels. Watch something else. Will Tennyson workout videos. I've been watching those. But I choose to not be scared. I choose to go in with my britches pulled up, knowing that my socks are going to get a little damp, and I'm ready to effing go. If this doesn't excite you as a college football fan, maybe this sport isn't for you. All right? It might not be for you. And I will stand firm on this. And this isn't a message to the Franco Nation. I love the Franco Nation. He pushes back against me. Let's go to AP. Injuries are going to pile up. They should eliminate the conference championship game. I'm in full agreement with you. Now, here's where I will agree with Franco Nation. And if y'all want me to put my face on there and you're tired of looking at the schedule, I could do that. He said Carter admitted he is a football fanatic first versus an LSU fanatic. Well, let's have a conversation about that. I would say I am a bigger LSU fan than I am a college football fan. But there's nothing wrong with being a mixture of the two. Now, I understand wholeheartedly that there are going to be plenty of college football fans that will enjoy this. If you're looking at this from a neutral perspective, yeah, sure, you're going to enjoy this. But from your own team perspective, and if you're just looking at your own personal team's benefit, Franco Nation is correct. It is better for each and every team that you're looking at right here to stay on an 8-game conference schedule. Okay? It just is. It's simple math. It's simple logic. 8 extra conference games means 8 extra conference losses. And that means it's probably going to be harder to make it into the college football playoff. Now, I will say, and I've done a lot of research on this, there is a strong belief in the SEC league office that they do feel that the college football playoff committee is going to reward the SEC for doing this. Now, if it stretches to 16, it's not as important in terms of the college football playoff. But if it stays at 12, the SEC feels that the committee is going to weigh this in a little bit more than most, or a little bit more than they already do, because they really didn't do it in year 1. They kind of sort of did it in year 2. But the SEC feels moving forward, going to 9, it's going to help them out. All right, or they're going to have more leeway with losing these games. And for that, sure. But I will still stand by what I feel about the sport that I love. And it's part of the reason why I love doing this as a living, because you, as a college football content creator, you do go back and forth over looking at things locally and then looking at things nationally. And there are instances where there are national college football stories that outweigh that of what I could talk about in terms of an LSU perspective, right? So last year, or yesterday, I had a big show lined up. What happens? Sharon Moore gets fired. That story is so big that everybody wants to talk about that, right? To where it bleeds over into how could this help or hurt LSU, or it could only help LSU when it comes to players coming out of the portal. So I think you as a fan need to do the same thing, right? Yeah, if I was a fan of LSU, I want my team to win as many games as possible and lose as many games, or lose as few games as possible. But that is your prerogative, right? And that's fine if you feel that way. But you are one team out of a 16-team ecosystem. And let's just say LSU on that bye week, you take a look at this schedule. LSU on bye, what are you getting on that bye week? Well, I'm getting Missouri and Arkansas on that bye week. I turn on the TV, get a game that used to be played on rivalry weekend. All right, that doesn't get your juices flowing. Guess what? You get Auburn and Ole Miss. You get Florida and Georgia. Sign me up for that. I get Texas and Mississippi State. I get South Carolina and Oklahoma. And that obviously is a pretty populated bye week that weekend. But you notice none of those games are rent-a-wins. None of them. And I love that. You're getting a better overall product. You're getting better games overall. Let's go to low 9112 or 912, excuse me. Honestly, it makes perfect sense for an SEC team to leave for a lesser conference. You'd make your money back in the playoffs. You're right. Theoretically, you're right. The problem is, do you want to take that chance? You know, one team that it would make a whole hell of a lot of sense for them to get out is Arkansas. They fit geographically better with the Big 12. They are a school that would win bigger in the Big 12. And I have brought this up plenty of times since the committee is did what they did to Notre Dame. You know, Arkansas and Notre Dame played earlier this year. My thing was whoever won that game goes to the SEC, right? Because I guarantee you this year's Notre Dame team would have rather played an SEC schedule than the schedule that they had, because the schedule that they had wasn't good enough for them to get in. So, yeah, you know, there's going to be some teams in the SEC that get crushed by this so much that they say, hey, maybe we should get out of this. South Carolina's like, you know what? The ACC doesn't sound too bad. It doesn't sound too bad at all. Okay. Let's go to Ronnie Schmidt. We still have the toughest opening game of anyone in the conference. We see legendary CEO is in here. George is in here. Shout out Eli Vision. You're the first commenter. This is a tough schedule. So there you go. I was also able to run to the corner and get a quick gift. Christmas is around the corner. Christmas came early with the schedule. I'm so excited, man. So freaking excited. I do not care. Well, Carter, what if LSU goes 7-5 next year? And then we probably weren't that good. We probably weren't that good. Let's go to Justin. He says, is the LSU scheduling of Ole Miss in week 3 is a punishment for leaving Oxford before the playoffs? No, I honestly think, I mean, could that have played a role into it? Yeah, but they did bring this up, and this was something that I heard from actually a few years ago when it was league meetings. They brought up how inequitable some of these bye weeks would be. So let's take Missouri, for instance. They had a schedule where they played 6 straight home games. You know, Missouri's home schedule and Missouri's opening schedule over the years has always been a little bit on the easier side. So what Missouri said to the SEC was, we want to keep our schedules as easy as possible to start the year. So what did the SEC do? They rewarded Missouri with that, right? So you take a look at Missouri. This is another season where their schedule starts a little bit softer than most. That looks to be UAPB at Kansas and Troy in the first 3 weeks of the year. Okay, if you want to do that, understand you're going to be ending the year with 9 SEC games. It's not easy. Not easy at all. Now, before we move any further, I do want to go through what I think are the big pros for LSU in this schedule. And we already went through some of these, but we had a few extra viewers, pop in here. One big pro for LSU is your tougher games are at home. Now, why is that a big benefit? Well, if your goal is to win a national championship, you want your tougher games at home. So, if you were to go through and list the most difficult teams on the LSU schedule in 2026, and we'll put up LSU schedule again here. The most difficult teams, Texas A&M, Alabama, and Texas. I think most of us would say those are the three most difficult teams. And I think a good chunk of you would say Clemson would be number 4. Well, those are the 4 games you get at home, or 4 of the games you get at home. Then you also start the season with 2 home games. I like starting the season at home. I simply do. So that's a huge benefit. Absolutely, positively, massive benefit. Then you get into a second big pro. Your games on the road are winnable. The inverse of that is also true. Who is LSU's toughest road game? Well, if I were to rank them, objectively, I would say it's Tennessee. You're going to be playing Tennessee on the back end of an Alabama and Texas run. But you also play Ole Miss on the road, which is probably the toughest game because of the emotions that will be at play there. But your road games are Kentucky under a first-year coach, Auburn under a first-year coach, and Arkansas under a first-year coach. 4 out of the 5 road games you play, first-year coaches, non-top 15 recruiters. Also, while I do think Arkansas will show up in numbers because this game means a lot to them, their season's probably over by then. So you could have a road environment that's not as raucous. That's another reason why I like a front-loaded home schedule. Now, the only big downside of playing Tennessee and Arkansas on the road is, yes, these are 2 SEC teams. Yes, you play these 2 games after Alabama and Texas, but it's also more than likely going to be cold. And obviously, you can't really prepare for a cold game in Baton Rouge. But still, your tougher games are at home. Your easier games are on the road. Now, if you're a lesser team, if you're in Arkansas, you want your easier games to be at home and the games you were going to lose anyway on the road. If you're Vanderbilt, which obviously is not the case anymore, but you get the point. And what's another pro about this schedule for LSU? I think LSU got really good bye week placement again. All right, so one key thing that was mentioned in the SEC broadcast, and this was something else that was brought up in my research in the 9-game conference schedule. And Dave Bartu has also talked about this. He's a very, very, very sharp college football mind. They did go to the SEC schools and asked for their input on what matters to them the most. From rivalry games to which 3 opponents must you have on the schedule every year, or which 2 opponents, and then we'll figure out the 3rd game. I love the bye week placement for LSU. I really, really, really do. That's about where I would place it. Saving that difficult November stretch for a 4-game stretch at the end of the year. Now, in theory, you would want your bye week to be after the Kentucky game, which would split your season evenly in two. And I would feel a lot of fans would want that. But why is that not what you want in this scenario? It's because you have Louisiana Tech and McNeese on the front half of your schedule. So while those games aren't technically bye weeks, they kind of sort of are bye weeks because you're going to take care of business in both of those games pretty easily. So before you go on this brutal November stretch, you're going to get a bye week before you play those final 4 weeks of the year. Now, Who Dat Fam says 7 losses. What the? Yeah. I mean, it's plausible that LSU loses 7 games in year 1. It's plausible, but it's not going to happen. You lose 7 games, what, you would be 5-7? Yeah, it's plausible. Now, the next thing, and I'm obviously reacting to this live. I haven't been able to go through this myself just yet. But what do LSU's tougher opponents have the week before playing LSU? And that to me is always important. So LSU, the week before playing Ole Miss at Ole Miss has 2 of their easier opponents on the schedule. Louisville and Charlotte. So that's not good. You would prefer it to be a difficult game or, more importantly, a road game. LSU before they play Texas A&M. Who does Texas A&M get? Well, they get Kentucky. So Texas A&M starts off with their 3 easiest opponents all at home. A&M's probably going to be 3-0 going into LSU. So one instant thing that really stands out to me is the week before, LSU's not getting a whole lot of favors. All right, so LSU, they'll get McNeese, and before LSU plays Kentucky, what does Kentucky have the week before? Well, they have South Alabama and a probably down South Carolina team. You would prefer that game, of course, to be one of the tougher games on Kentucky's schedule. All right, LSU plays Mississippi State. Who does Mississippi State have? Oh, they get a bye week. All right, so LSU goes on the road and they play Auburn. Who does Auburn have the week before? Okay, they're on the road at Georgia. So that's really the first big benefit that LSU is going to get on the schedule. However, the week before that, Auburn's going to have a bye week. So in theory, they're going to have overall fresher legs. And then you get to the Alabama game, as we've discussed and has been the case every year since 2010, LSU and Alabama both have a bye week before playing one another. All right, so now you get to Texas. Who does Texas have before playing LSU? Well, Texas has an early bye, and they'll have at Missouri before going on the road at LSU. So that's a big benefit. Texas will be on the back end of back-to-back road games. The only downside is A&M did that, or I say A&M. Texas had to do that a lot this past year. In fact, Texas had 4 consecutive road games at one point. We continue. LSU, the week before playing Tennessee. Who does Tennessee have the week before LSU? They are at A&M. Okay, so that's a benefit, or at least it's a push. And then LSU plays Arkansas on the final week of the season. Who does Arkansas have the week before LSU? They are at Texas. Okay, so that sets up nicely for LSU. So as you can see, one thing working against LSU in this schedule is this is a schedule where they didn't get any massive breaks, but if you have the bye week before Alabama and Bama has a bye week before you lose some of that, right? But once again, I like the bye week placement for LSU. Even though the SEC, one thing I would have done is just make sure you can have a double bye, right? I know it's kind of weird and how you would actually have to, what you would have to do to ensure that. But there you go. Let's go to Mr. LSU fan for life. Is it safe to say LSU will be retooling as opposed to rebuilding? And because of that, Kiffin should be in contention year one. Yeah, I think it's a lot to say it's a really down year if LSU is not in contention in year one. So in the stream a little bit earlier, there's going to be so much pressure for LSU to hit the ground running because of how much money has been poured into Lane and his staff and this first season of NIL at LSU. And look, I mean, just take into consideration what we did in this year's 7-5 team. Imagine in last year's, or should I say this year's 7-5 team, you didn't spend in the portal the way that you decided to spend. Well, you're probably a bad team. You're probably not a bowl team. Yeah, 10-2 is definitely getting you in the playoff. There are, let's just say, there weren't any 3-loss teams that got into the playoff outside of Alabama, and that's only a technicality. Can a 9-3 LSU get into the playoff? Yeah, they can. But you would need a lot of things to go in your favor. A lot. But there you go. Now, here's what we're going to do. In the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to answer as many questions as we possibly can. If you super chat, we'll keep this party moving. This was a fun stream, dude. I'm gonna be studying the schedule all game, all day long. I'll have an early week by week prediction for LSU. I'll post that on the Patreon. We've been overall somewhat accurate with our season predictions over the past couple of years. 2 years ago, I was pretty much on that 8-4, 9-3 line. That's about where we were. And I was about 9-3 this year for LSU. Wasn't close. We were a true 7-5 team. So I'd say I was accurate, but year over year, we've been pretty good at, season predictions. Ooh. How's LSU going to get the offensive lineman transfer portals and have them play with cohesion? That's your biggest worry. Yeah. Just got to trust the lane train, man. I've heard a few coaches going off this week about how the 9-game schedule only puts the SEC at a disadvantage. Yeah, and the biggest critic is Kirby. That was the biggest coach who talked about this week. And he's right. Okay. He's probably right about that. No, I know he's right about that. Sam says wait till year 2. But I do agree, Sam. You got to hit the ground running, baby. Not necessarily in terms of going like 10-2, but would 8-4 be nice next year? Yeah, I'll take 8-4. But one thing I would say as far as this schedule is concerned, let's take Texas A&M, for instance. How good is Texas A&M? Well, let's pull up A&M's 2025 schedule, all right? So A&M, while they did have to play Notre Dame, you take a look at who they didn't play. A&M didn't have to play Tennessee. A&M did not have to play Oklahoma. A&M did not have to play a really good Georgia team. And while they probably beat Florida, Florida is a giant killer. Let's go to Cliff, my roommate. Do we have a chance to get Underwood back? And if so, do we want him back? How much of an NIL would it take to get him? I don't know what his price would be, but yeah, you got a chance. I don't know if that would be my first option because, well, it's simple. I want someone that can play and win now, and I don't know if he can do that. One thing I will say, Okay, I almost got duped by a fake report. Huh? 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 You always got to be careful. I looked down. I was like, wait, that's not real. Do you see a world where Underwood would do something like Dante Moore, which is what? Go to Oregon? It's a good question for Pegasus. Any surprise transfers thus far? No, not really. I think for me, when it comes to the portal, I mean, is Juwan Johnson a bit of a shock? Maybe so, with how glowingly he spoke about being at LSU. But I also understand him basically saying, "Hey, it's a brand new coach. I play 1,000 different positions. Let me go to where I feel I would be wanted." It also comes down to if Juwan actually wants to play quarterback. If he wants to play quarterback, he would need to go down a level or two. Did Ahmad Bro bounce? Yeah. But no surprise transfers really at all. So there you go. Well, that'll do it for me. Once again, coming up on Patreon, we will go through and I'll give you what I think LSU's schedule is going to look like in year one. And that'll be linked for all our patrons and members. So please hit that membership button. It's just a join button down below the video. We'll talk to you soon, baby. It is Power Hour LSU. Boom. Tonight, we are doing Trader Joe's lasagna. Let's go. Let's go.